This week, we welcome Damon Small, Technical Director of Security Consulting at NCC Group, for an interview covering the Florida water treatment facility hack and the convergence of OT and IT. Next up, Artisom Holub, Senior Security Analyst, and Austin McBride, Data Scientist, both from Cisco Umbrella, join us to talk about some chart-topping threats and how attacks will rage in 2021. In the security news, XM Cyber announces integration with Palo Alto Networks' Cortex XSOAR API. Security lessons learned. Cycode raises $20 million. Help Systems acquires Beyond Security. Accurix Terrascan integrates with the Argo project. Sequent Security API Sentinel 2.0. SecLore Security 24 protects sensitive data. Who's really behind the Colonial Pipeline cyber attack? ForcePoint acquires Cyber Inc. Sophos launches the industry-only XDR solution for endpoint server firewall and email security. And all that and more. Stay tuned on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. This is Security Weekly, for security professionals by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly. Hey IT and security pros, if you remember one thing from today's episode, it should be to check out the leading cloud directory platform, JumpCloud. JumpCloud's directory platform makes it easier to solve today's IT challenges by unifying device and user management through a single pane of glass. With JumpCloud securely managing your users and their devices, doing common things like onboarding and offboarding remote workers is easy. Try JumpCloud for free today at securityweekly.com/JumpCloud and help your organization move to a modern, secure hybrid work model.
MediaOps presents DevOps Connect, May 19th at RSA Conference. Christopher Krebs, former director of the U.S. Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, will keynote in a live fireside chat with host Alan Schimmel, which will also include Q&A with the audience. Besides an exciting keynote, you can also attend 30 other sessions featuring a powerhouse lineup of DevSecOps experts. Sign up for this free event now.
Wide-scale adoption of cloud applications, an increase in remote workers, and expansion of branch offices has rendered the centralized, on-premises security model impractical. Enter Cisco Umbrella. Umbrella now includes secure web gateway, firewall, and cloud access security broker functionality, plus integration with Cisco SD-WAN, all delivered from a single cloud security service. It helps businesses of all sizes secure their network and extend protection to roaming users and branch offices. Security doesn't have to be complicated. Get simple, smart, and powerful security with Cisco Umbrella. Visit securityweekly.com/Cisco Umbrella to learn more. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly, episode number 227 for May 12th, 2021. I'm your host, Paul Asadorian, joined remotely by Adrian Sanabria. Adrian, welcome.
Hey, and welcome to the best pipeline coverage in the business.
That's right. Gotta talk pipelines. Mr. Tyler Shields is here with us as well. Tyler, welcome.
Hey, Paul. Thank you very much. Good to see you again.
Yes. A couple of quick announcements before we dive right into it. If you want to stay in the loop, all things Security Weekly, please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe. You can subscribe via your favorite podcast catcher, our YouTube channel, or sign up for our mailing list, join our Discord server, and follow us on our newest live streaming platform. That's right, we are on Twitch. Also, if you have a specific guest or topic you'd like us to cover on one of the upcoming shows, submit your suggestions for guests at securityweekly.com/guest. Complete that form, and we review those suggestions on a regular basis. Damon Small is the Technical Director of Security Consulting at NCC Group, where he consults with global leaders in critical infrastructure defense. And today he joins us, to talk about pipelines and Florida water treatment attacks. I think we had a new attack that kind of superseded the Florida water attack. We can talk about both, and especially the convergence of OT and IT. Damon, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here, folks. Thanks for having me.
Nice to have you here. I guess we were talking about the pipeline attack, of course, at the before we started recording. So I guess we jump right into that because I find it interesting. In of course the memes resulting in what people are calling the gas shortage, and just people post ridiculous things. I'm like, you really they just do no research. Well, I guess the Russians do research before they create the propaganda, right? That's what I feel like is happening.
Yeah.
Is there's a lot of propaganda. Damon, what in your opinion, what's happening with the pipeline attack?
Yeah, well, if you're talking about the propaganda specifically, I mean, one immediate effect has been the shortages. I woke up to the news this morning, and there's already lines of cars trying to gas up their vehicles. So is there really a shortage, or is this exacerbated by panic? Like we had a run on toilet paper when COVID was
right.
exciting. But I mean, clearly this attack is real. The Colonial Pipeline is actually inoperable right now, and an attack has in fact happened. So that much we know for sure. Now, as we continue discussing this and thinking about what we do moving forward, the conversations will continue to get interesting, I think.
For sure. Yeah, and go ahead, Adrian. I know you researched
Just say, are we totally sure it's not a conspiracy by Tesla?
There's
some Tesla owners feeling pretty superior right now.
And many not being shy about it on social media either.
Probably.
Which is interesting. I find it interesting too, this attack being ransomware, and we delved kind of into it a little bit. It doesn't appear that the intention was to have this consequence necessarily, at least from the evidence that I've seen. I think FireEye had a pretty good post on the technical breakdown. And I think that from what I've read too, the computers that actually operate the pipeline were shut down as a precaution to make sure they didn't get ransomware. So hopefully they can clean it up and we don't have to talk about this particular incident, although it is a good, I think, starting point. Damon, talk about the interesting relationship between OT and IT. How do you see that relationship playing out today?
Yeah, and we've been having in our industry, we've been having this conversation about that convergence of OT and IT for a long time, and I think this just puts a really fine point on it, which is that in the 20 or so years ago, when you had an air gap, for example, OT was protected by virtue of the fact that it didn't communicate outside of the four walls, so to speak, of the facility. So we've known for a long time that there's good reasons to have these interconnects between OT and IT, but this, like I said, underscores the risk that is involved and how much more difficult it is to protect, because you don't have to hop over the fence anymore to gain access to those systems. It can happen from across the open internet. And I think you're right in your earlier comment. I don't know that the adversary in this case knew who they were attacking. And they came, DarkSide themselves came out with a statement that said, look, we're just in this for the money. We
Right.
didn't mean to disrupt an entire society. So I don't have any reason to not believe them. I think they're, a lot of times the bad guys are opportunistic. They found a network they could access, and it was probably after the fact that they realized, oh dear, this is, a very significant pipeline in the United States.
And I think there's a lot of reasons why it's interesting, Dim, because you kind of hint towards that critical infrastructure tends to be a little more vulnerable in terms of, their exposures, because, upgrading and maintaining those computers is still, it's tricky business. It's not just upgrading someone's laptop where if it blows up, ship them a new laptop and they can use their home computer for a little while. I mean, we call it critical infrastructure for a reason.
It's critical infrastructure, and it has to be operational all the time. I mean, a lot of us that are working, in the industrial control system space got our start in IT, myself included. So back in the 90s, I was a sysadmin, and most traditional businesses, your users go home at the end of the day. In worst case scenario, you've got a lengthy outage window every single night. You don't have that in the factory or the refinery or the pipeline company. You don't have those outages. They're expected to be up and running, 100% of the time for months at a time, 18, 24 months at a time. So those outages to perform these necessary upgrades are few and far between, and they're very costly. I mean, dude, can you imagine how much money, how much revenue will have been lost, not only from Colonial Pipeline, but for everybody that's involved in the energy sector in this country? I mean, there's a lot of money at stake here. And also the critical nature of these devices that support the control systems, they're often purpose built. And, you don't go to a big box store and, buy a PLC off the shelf. Sometimes the operating systems and the firmware and the software that runs on these things is highly specialized and might be beyond the scope of support by a traditional IT staff. So it's a problem that's complicated in many, many ways.
I mean, it's interesting too when we think about that these systems have to be up all the time. Mm-hmm. If I were to be challenged with that, like here in the studio, I'd be like, well, I need remote access so I can make sure it's running all the time. And I think that's how we get ourselves in these situations, such as the Florida water treatment plant.
Well, exactly. And it's interesting you bring up Florida, because that was the attack vector was, I think it was TeamViewer, mm-hmm. remote access software. And it's easy to jump on the bandwagon of demonizing the remote access software. But even though, as an information security professional, I make my living, trying to dissuade or trying to reduce risk to the extent possible. But I would caution everybody listening today that businesses don't tend to make decisions like this lightly. And there's the alternative to remote access is having on-site support mm-hmm. all the time. And that gets costly. Or if you don't have on-site support, like, I have a client that operates, drilling rigs offshore. And if you have to get someone out there, you've got to spin the main rotor on a Bell 206 at great expense. So there's good reasons to have remote access. Mm-hmm. But before everyone gets out their pitchforks, it can be done in a way that is secure. In the case of the Florida water treatment facility, don't have those sorts of devices directly exposed to the internet. Use a VPN maybe, and my goodness, use strong authentication, multi-factor authentication. That could have prevented that attack in Florida.
It seems like the Florida attack was from what I studied about this attack that was made public, it was more of a casual attack. It seemed to me like it was hacking like in the 90s, like someone just stumbled across the system and was like, wow, that's kind of cool. Like, look what I can do. Like, that was kind of neat, right?
Yeah, it's interesting, though, because the adversary had access to the system for, 4 minutes? It wasn't a very long period of time. And also, I'm going off of information I heard just like y'all did. So if anybody heard a different story, please let me know. But apparently the adversary knew exactly what changes to make within the water treatment software that had been gained access to. So that suggests that it was somebody that knew what they were doing and maybe a little more targeted than just, high-tech vandalism. And that's the only thing that spooks me out is that, they immediately started changing the amount of lye that was going into the treated water, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of angry ex-coworkers out there. If you look back through breaches, some of these that on the surface might look like, terrorism or state sponsored or something like that, sometimes end up being, somebody that was fired and they failed to remove all their access before they left.
100%. Yeah. I mean, there's lots of ways that credentials can be stolen, but I agree with you. I mean, that seems to be the most likely scenario, doesn't it? That it was somebody that no longer worked there and their offboarding processes didn't work.
Yeah. Because I think if you are an attacker and you're going after those systems, not to say it's, hackers have this kind of knack for going and learning something completely new and becoming enough of an expert to achieve a goal. If you're going to go through all of that, I don't think the attack would have played out the way that it did, right? I think it's more likely that it's a disgruntled ex-employee and they knew how to log in and go change this thing without having to do a whole bunch of research and figure out how to be stealthy about it, right? That's what we tend to associate, at least I do, with more nation-state style attacks.
No, absolutely. And I tell my clients all the time, I mean, don't worry about the adversary that you catch because they were careless or noisy or whatever. I mean, the really good adversary will not let you know that they're there. Now, how many years ago was it that the store, the retail chain Target became a target? And if I recall correctly, we didn't plan on talking about this, but I believe the bad guys were in Target's network for several months before they were caught. So, I mean, that proves the point.
It was a couple of weeks. Yeah, in 2013. Yeah, it was almost a month, I think. And it was right before Black Friday, if I recall.
Okay. I believe you. My point is they were there for a while, whereas in Florida, the adversary was there for minutes. Not days or weeks. But I mean, it still spooks you, right? I mean, if just a casual, just let's say it was a disgruntled former employee was able to cause that much panic, imagine an actual concerted attack by someone that really wanted to wreak havoc. The threat is real. The threat is real.
Yeah, it seems to me there's two solutions that have to be implemented, right? One that you've already kind of talked about, Damon, is process. Making sure that when you offboard employees that you rotate credentials. There's not really a hard cost to doing a lot of these good practices and implementing policies and procedures that lead to a better security posture. Are there efforts to improve these across the board? Because as I've heard too, people who are in the government, Congressman Langevin, and in the White House briefing, they both mentioned that critical infrastructure is largely, if not all, run by privately held companies that do have the power to implement these, but the government isn't necessarily forcing them to implement a policy or procedure. There are guidance, right? What can we do to improve the processes, I guess?
Yeah, it's interesting because as a computer scientist and technologist, it's easy to fall in love with the technology. And let's face it, policy and procedure is not fun. It's not sexy. It's not why most of us got in this industry to begin with. But you're right. I mean, it's the policy and procedure that dictates how humans behave when they're interacting with technology and what is the expected behavior when they're supporting it. So, I mean, I'm reluctant to suggest regulation as, the solution every time something like this happens. But it could be that a business understands that their information assets are important, but they don't necessarily understand the degree to which they need to be supported in terms of these policies and procedures. And that's where regulation can be helpful because it prescribes behavior to an organization. So, the idea of, self-policing, so to speak, in industry or self-attestation that, trust us, we're secure because we filled out this checklist. I mean, that can only go so far. So I'll stop just short of saying that federal regulation has to get involved in how to do this. But I mean, it already is a completely different part of the Fed space. But if you are a DoD contractor or you otherwise provide goods or services to the DoD, there's a new set of standards and regulations coming called CMMC. Completely different topic, but it's going to be a game changer, and it has the potential to be a big deal for very similar reasons, because organizations don't yet know how to manage their environments in a way that's fit for risk.
And that has the potential, CMMC has the potential to have some teeth, right? Like you won't get a government contract if you're not compliant. You put that in critical infrastructure, like what you can't be finding critical infrastructure companies that are providing water and gas in our infrastructure, right? Like how do you balance that? I never really quite thought of it that way, right?
I know. I mean, you're right. And that's why I said I'm reluctant to suggest regulation as the solution, because if you believe that there's 300,000 service providers that work for the Department of Defense, then if one can't sell the green widget, then somebody else will sell the green widget. Right. But you're right. I mean, this is one pipeline that starts in Houston and ends in New Jersey, I think it is. And now the country is we're freaking out, frankly, because of that one pipeline. So you're right. You put sanctions on that and say, okay, you've been very bad. You have to shut down operations. Imagine if it was the power grid.
Yeah.
Imagine if it was the transmission parts of the network that are moving that power from where it's generated. It's not just the producers, right? I mean, the whole thing. I mean, I'm in Texas, so I know a thing or two about fragile power grids.
Yes.
That taught us that, I mean, we want to be as close to 100% efficiency as possible, which is good from a business standpoint. But what it means is there's very little free space, for lack of a better way to put it. When we have something go down, we don't have extra capacity. We don't have a lot of it anyway.
Tyler?
I'll take it even one step further. You pretty much would have to put regulation in play for this to happen. I know you're reticent to kind of make that leap, but I'll make that leap because I think from an incentive standpoint, there's only so far that these critical infrastructure providing private companies will go before they start to reach into margins too far and they say, hey, that's all I'm going to do. And if it doesn't meet the minimum guidelines or the minimum reality of expectations of what security should be, without enforcement, without fines and regulations and requirements, they won't do it, right? They're just not incented to do so. They have the "it won't hit me" attitude, right? So I think we're going to have to find sanctions and fines and other regulations and requirements on anybody that's providing a critical infrastructure component. And if you can't do it, you don't provide that component. We will build something else as a nation to support that eventually, and that's the only way that we're going to stop these attacks from happening.
I look at it as how I discipline my kids, right? Sometimes it's positive reinforcement, sometimes it's negative reinforcement, and I tend to, if you stick with one or the other, if I'm constantly just blocking their iPads and cutting off their access, or if I'm constantly buying them some reward, it's a balance of the two that I find works. And I think this is a very similar scenario where you want to kind of balance both positive and negative reinforcement to get the appropriate behavior that you're looking for.
Right. I mean, you can't find, organizations that have nothing to pay the fines with. I mean, if you look at some of these, running a water treatment plant is just part of the city budget. It's just a public-private partnership, or part of the city's operations.
Water in electric and power are interesting because there are businesses that encourage you to use less of the product, use the least amount of the product as possible, right? Whereas look at Microsoft or any other company, we want to use as much of our, AWS, we want to use as many services as possible, right? When you get into power and water, they're like, no, we want you to conserve and not use as much, which is weird.
But I mean, generally, a lot of them, their budget is whatever it needs to be to clean up the shards of whatever broke on the floor and replace it, and that's it.
Yep.
Sorry, if something physical hasn't shattered, and if there's not a leak somewhere, then they're not doing anything with it.
And do we have to change that as a nation and all pay a little bit more for our utilities, our gas, our electric, our power to ensure that it's safe? Is that the right way to solve it?
I'm not sure that's even an option. I mean, you're looking at and so one of the interesting things here, we actually had a talk on this at B-Sides Knoxville. We had a couple lawyers talking about this, and they shone, a bit of a light on the organizations that run these things. And there is budget. There is federal money and interest-free loans that are available that a lot of these organizations just don't even know about. And I think the conclusion we came to is there's going to have to be some community level involvement here, to get us across the finish line. Maybe some cybersecurity folks, maybe some concerned citizens, are going to have to step in and help out. And I think that might be the only way we get there.
I wonder if part of the problem is that, funding is available. You're right. And if it's not being used, is it that the businesses don't recognize the need, or they think that, they're talking about everybody else, I've got my stuff together. I understand how to protect my information assets. Because it's basic, like budgeting, right? Each of us has a home budget, and you never want to pay more to protect something than what it would cost to replace that thing. right? Well, that's the problem. Do we really understand how much our information assets are worth until something bad like this happens? So I kind of feel like, again, it's not the technological part of the problem, but I still can't shake this feeling that we're not really good at evaluating information assets. And until we can quantify that in a more meaningful way than we do today, then it's difficult to answer the question, how much money should we spend to protect it, right? That's what it comes down to. And I don't know the answer, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's an interesting formula on how you mitigate operational risk and reduce your technical debt in critical infrastructure systems. Because it's hard if something's working and it's running, right? It's hard to justify improvements.
Well, and it's difficult. I can't tell you how many times I've said this, because something bad didn't happen yesterday doesn't have any bearing on the likelihood of something bad happening tomorrow. In other words, probability is not cumulative. So I think a lot of us, particularly operators that have been up and running for a very long time, it's easy to become complacent. Say, man, we haven't had an incident in a very, very long time, so we must be doing something right?
Perfect track record.
Yeah.
Until it isn't, right? As a, my pen testing days, I can't tell you how many times I heard that. Well, nothing bad's happened yet, and we used to joke that we needed to provide breach as a service, because that's the only way some of these organizations were going to, spend any money on it, was if something bad actually happened, then they'll go fix it. So again, it's back in that, we'd rather not think about it unless, water's spurting out, and there's a broken, pipe on Main Street or something like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the best time to buy a plunger is before you need it. Right. I mean, and so, probability is not cumulative. We can't predict these things. And I don't know. It's not just the technology, even though, this is the third time I've said it. The technology is the sexy part, is the interesting part. But we've got, for us to have credibility as computer nerds and have a seat at the boardroom table, so to speak, we've got to get better at communicating with the business. I think we're not going to expect the business to become computer scientists overnight. So maybe that's our homework, is we've got to learn to speak their language.
I think one of the common grounds you might have is deeming it as maintenance, because in my experience with critical infrastructure and industrial control systems, there is maintenance that happens all of the time. It sounds like a push to have security be part of that ongoing maintenance, much like we've done in the kind of DevOps realm. Break things down into smaller parts and incorporate security into the everyday maintenance could be a strategy. I can't be the first one to suggest that, right?
Yeah, and just
to... It sounded cooler when you say it.
Yeah.
Right? I guess so.
I do have some numbers here just to get an idea of the scale. So for water utilities, there are 4,000 urban service providers and 50,000 rural service providers. And generally, where you find the private businesses are in some of the larger, more urban ones. So you've got, you might have one that serves millions of people, and then there's a whole bunch of rural ones out there that serve, a couple thousand, couple hundred people. And it's the privately owned is actually about 12%, and the rest is public, because most of those rural ones are owned by the tiny town, out in the sticks, and it's well provided or something like that. It's just not attractive to a business to own or to run that. But on the electric side, it's 3,745 electric utilities. And in that case, it's interesting. It's actually the bulk of those are public owned, but they serve a smaller population. The smaller number of electric utilities are private owned or investor owned, but they serve the majority of the U.S. population.
Oh, that is interesting. Okay. Well,
so that's the size of the problem, just in terms of number of organizations that would have to, comply with something like that?
Well, and that's the thing, is trying to figure out what that is, comply with what. Is it going to be regulation? Is it going to be, another set of standards? I mean, there's so many ways to skin this cat, really. But I one of the questions that keeps coming up, was this just a one-off incident, with the pipeline, or is this a sign of things to come? Can we expect more of this sort of thing to happen? If I could predict that, I wouldn't have to show up for work every day, but I do think that the information security problem and the vulnerabilities that tend to persist in these operational environments isn't going to be solved quickly and not without significant effort, I think.
Well, Damon, we'll have to have you back because we could keep going for a long time. But thank you for appearing on the show today and sharing with our audience and ourselves your thoughts on this matter. And hopefully we get a chance to chat again soon.
I love the sound of my own voice, so anytime. It was great fun chatting with you folks.
Awesome.
I liked it a lot. Thank you.
Thanks, Damon. Stick around. We are going to be talking about some upcoming and new threats that are out there for 2021 with the folks from Cisco Umbrella. Stay tuned. When it comes to web app and API security, the choice is simple. You can choose Fastly's security solution that teams will actually use in full blocking mode, just like 90% of their customers. Or you can stick with costly options that you probably just turn off. You can get Fastly's all-in-one platform that protects apps everywhere they live, however they're built. Or departments can agree to disagree. You can go to securityweekly.com/Fastly to learn more. Or you can just wish you had. Here's Jacob. He's uploading documents to the cloud and chatting notes to his outside agency partners. This is Zoe. She's rushing to share the customer list with marketing and is sending the latest product roadmap to her mobile device. Which one of them is creating insider risk? They both are. Everyone creates insider risk, sometimes with malicious intent and sometimes just by doing their jobs. Empower productivity and protect your data with Code 42 Insider. Visit securityweekly.com/Code 42 to learn more. Searching for the best way to protect passwords and privileged accounts? Thycotic empowers security and IT operation teams to discover, secure, and manage all types of privileged accounts with the fastest time to value of any privileged access management solution. Get up and running fast with solutions for privileged account discovery, turnkey installation, automation, auditing, and reporting tools with Thycotic's free 30-day trial. Thycotic, the fastest growing PAM provider in the market, available both on-premise and in the cloud. Get started today with a free Thycotic secret server trial at securityweekly.com/Thycotic. Welcome back, everyone, to Enterprise Security Weekly. Security Weekly listeners will save $100 on their RSA Conference 2021 All Access Pass. RSA Conference will be a fully virtual experience from May 17th through the 20th. Security Weekly will be live streaming next week, Monday through Thursday, in virtual broadcast alley, interviewing some of the top sponsors and speakers for the event. To register using our discount code, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC 2021. Use the code 5U1Cyber. We hope to virtually see you there. Artisom Holub and Austin McBride from Cisco Umbrella are here with us today. Artie's a senior security analyst and frequent presenter at conferences such as RSA, Black Hat, and The First. Austin is a data scientist and regular contributor to the Cisco Umbrella security blog. They join us today to talk about some of the chart-topping threats. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thanks for having
us. Hi, guys.
Nice to have you both here. Looking forward to our discussion today. I think in terms of trends and threats, one of the topics that we were talking about that I'd like to start with is crypto mining, which is interesting because early in our actual Security Weekly's push to the cloud and containers, someone took over our container environment and uploaded a container to do crypto mining. And this was several years ago, and don't leave your Docker API exposed. Some people still do today, right? But crypto mining has really taken off, and I think the prediction is we'll continue to do so. So I'll turn it over to the both of you to kind of set the stage by starting with this threat and then moving into other areas that we see fit.
Sure, absolutely. So yes, we see a lot of containerized crypto mining going on in a lot of different environments. I'll take one step back, though, for some of the listeners, just to kind of explain the basics of what crypto mining is. So we'll use Bitcoin as an example. So cryptocurrency mining really is just the process of generating new units of cryptocurrency. So in the case of Bitcoin, a miner will use computing power to generate P2P Bitcoin transactions and is rewarded with new Bitcoins proportional to the amount of networking and compute they added to verify those transactions. So that's how you make money mining Bitcoin, and it's very similar with other cryptocurrencies. That's one of the reasons that we see malicious actors, hijacking infrastructure in order to mine on your dime and get free money out of it.
Yeah, Austin, I kind of liken this to the transaction fee is kind of built in the way that you described it. And, I think the example in a bank would be if I were to make an ACH transfer, there would be a transaction fee, right? And in Bitcoin, that's a kind of a community-driven experience, right?
Correct. That's right. And what we're seeing in enterprise environments really is a flavor of crypto mining, which is cryptojacking, which is basically just the secret use of your computing infrastructure to mine cryptocurrency. So that could be like in JavaScript browser exploit, or it could be code running in one of your EC2s or set up on one of your servers or individual machines. There's quite a few different ways that people can use your infrastructure. Some are a little bit more nefarious than others. Here actually is a quick breakdown of kind of what we see crypto mining wise across different verticals. So obviously this changes over time, but we use anonymized customer demographic information and then pair that with the robust amount of DNS security logs that we process, over 650 billion a day. And this gives us an idea of how this activity impacts certain verticals. So as you can see here, higher education and financial services are kind of at the top for crypto mining specifically. And I would say in the financial services sector, this is mostly not customers that are in the business of day-to-day mining. This is someone just taking use of the infrastructure, whether that be an internal party like an employee or an external party that came in to set up some mining software while they look for something else to do in your environment.
Yeah, awesome. I'm actually surprised to see higher education and financial services kind of have an equal share of being the victims of crypto mining. I would think higher education would have been a little higher and not so much with financial services. I tend to think of financial services as a little more hardened, but.
Yeah, quick question there. Are you able to separate out like illegitimate crypto mining from intentional crypto mining in that?
So there's a way from our end for us to tell the difference between those two. And I'll break down just briefly what those are. So legitimate crypto mining would be crypto mining that you yourself are doing. It could be an individual employee that's mining for themselves on corporate networks. So that's technically, I guess, legitimate, but according to the business, it would be considered illegitimate because they're using corporate resources, of course, to do that. But we can tell from our end what's illicit versus legitimate purely based off of whether that specific customer is in the business of mining cryptocurrency. So the vast majority of our customers are not. So if they see crypto mining in their environment, they're going to want to stop it because it's not something that's contributing to the bottom line.
Okay.
We also noticed a strong correlation between the amount of crypto mining or cryptojacking when the prices are changing. So when the Bitcoin and all of the cryptocurrencies, which usually tied to the Bitcoin, dropped significantly, so did the whole crypto mining and cryptojacking activities. But now when we see another boom, another peak of price, it's no surprise that crypto mining and cryptojacking is picking up. So again, some of the charts might be a little bit biased because we only can tell what we see. It doesn't really cover the whole picture. And we also don't really know what's the deal with a lot of the cloud-based services. A lot of cloud-based services had to include crypto mining activities in their service agreements because a lot of them are being abused by the people who are supposed to do something good with it, but instead they're using all of that power to mine coins, which in many ways is not what those services are designed for. And most services, they don't really account for 100% use of their power that they provide. And usually if you do some legitimate things, you don't really use all of that power. But if you're using it for crypto mining or cryptojacking and you are in control how much resources you can get towards your crypto mining process, you probably rank it up all the way to 100%. So again, strong correlation between the price of the cryptocurrencies and crypto mining, cryptojacking activities. That's one thing that we observe recently.
So I have two quick questions for you guys. Does the amount of available coins matter? Like if you've kept this data over time, as Bitcoin has been mined more and more and more, obviously the amount of available coins decreases, thus the price increases, and it takes longer to pop a coin out. Have you guys seen a change in the amount of crypto mining jacking that's occurring based on that shift? And then my second question is there particular cryptocurrencies that get targeted more than others? Is it always Bitcoin? Do they do Ethereum or Litecoin or insert other coin here? Are you seeing any trends around those as well?
Sure. I'll take the first question, and then Artie, if you want to take the second one. So we have seen just a general uptrend in crypto mining, period. And this is for a wide variety of coins. As you mentioned, the number of Bitcoins are dwindling, and mining difficulty is, steadily increasing. So what we have seen a shift in from last year to this year is a movement from malicious third parties targeting smaller businesses that maybe have less compute available to use for mining. And that's transitioned over to more enterprise environments where they have a lot more EC2 instances and a lot more infrastructure to be leveraged for mining coins that are a little bit more difficult than some of the other coins or what they had been in the past. So we're still going to see a continual shift and increased use of infrastructure and a little bit more targeting towards the enterprise space. But you're also going to see a lot of variety in other coins. Artie, do you want to chime in on that?
Yes. If we talk about cryptojacking, you rarely see people mining something like Bitcoin, but because as it was mentioned, it requires like enormous amount of power. So it's usually professional Bitcoin miners who can build a significant amount of power, like a whole mining farm, to mine that. I think that also attends something to the Ethereum. What we see from illicit crypto mining and cryptojacking, Monero, it is a highly distributed network of mining pools, and also that coin was built with anonymity, and it was built as much private as possible, which makes it a lot easier, a lot harder for researchers to track where those funds are going to. So a lot of the cryptojacking activities actually geared towards what they call altcoins. Bitcoin and Ethereum would be like a primal example of coins, but if we look at the amount of altcoins out there right now, there are probably hundreds, maybe getting into the thousands. So all of them are being mined with any kind of the possibilities. But from illegal standpoint of view, most coins that being mined that way are probably Monero coins, because once again, they used for anonymized purchases. It's a lot harder for law enforcement and for researchers to track. And also we see the introduction of the Bitcoin mixers or just cryptocurrency mixers. That's where any kind of coins going into the mixer, and then they make multiple transactions going from Bitcoin to Ethereum, from Ethereum to Monero, from Monero to many other altcoins, and then they've been converted back, and that's how they hide the tracks of the funds that were either acquired through illicit crypto mining or cryptojacking.
Awesome. Where do we want to go from here now that we've definitely covered crypto mining? I think pretty well. Are there certain detections and defenses that you have in terms of recommendations?
Well, I think if you want to protect your network from illicit crypto mining activity, there are like few ways to do that. So if we talk about the majority of kind of low effort crypto mining, it's relatively easy to identify that activity just by monitoring mining pools, because mining pools, it's something that's supposed to be publicly available. So just having that block list in place or monitoring activity of any connection to these mining pools can help you to identify and limit this kind of activity within your network. Other than that, when crypto mining software getting bundled with other malware, so you won't see just straightforward, for example, a credential stealing malware. It will add crypto mining just for the sake of additional income. So first part of the malware will steal some credentials, and second part of the malware will drop that miner to be present in your network as long as you don't notice it. So in that sense, you have to apply just your regular security approach, where you don't really want any kind of malware, will it be credential stealing malware or mining malware, to be on your network. So it's hardening endpoints, have the layered security approach to your enterprise in protecting from these activities, just like from any other malicious activities.
And when you say monitor mining pools, I assume that there's, like in most content security, DNS security products, it's just going to be a checkbox for crypto mining, right? That you can check. But I assume it would be by domain name?
Correct. For the most part, it's just a fixed block list, which we as a security researchers identify. So usually you get if we talk about the software-based crypto mining malware, you reverse engineer it and you see if there is a static list of the pools that it's connected to, you extract that and then you import that into your block list. Or there are like a lot of publicly available one, the one that anyone can connect to in many cases, because the entry bar into the illicit crypto mining is so low. Script kiddies do that. They just take some, very well-known vulnerability, bundle it with the exploit, attach mining software to it, and just send it out, hoping that it will, land somewhere.
Yeah, that's right. And, we're not saying that the vast majority of people who are watching or any specific environment, you're going to see crypto mining in your environment. The amount that you see in there is really what you need to worry about. So we're not saying that all crypto mining activity in your environment is inherently bad or that it's going to weigh down your system, but there are certain things that you should look for, especially in your DNS query logs, that will kind of point you in the direction of if it's something that you really need to worry about versus not. I think we have a slide on this already. So they're kind of like two flavors that we see a lot of crypto mining wise on the DNS side of the house. So one is web-based mining and the other is software-based mining. So in the case of web-based mining, these are generally JavaScript exploits that are only working in browser while you're visiting a page. So if you're on a site that's not a typical site and you're watching a 30-minute video, there could be an ad or a mining script in the background that's leveraging your system to mine very small amounts of cryptocurrency while you're visiting that page. And as soon as you leave that page, close the tab, X out of your browser, it's done, and it kind of drops off the map. And so that's why you can see here on the side, we see these very small spikes upward. And so these are web-based miners, where it's just mining a coin for a very brief period of time. And if you get enough people visiting that site and doing it, it could be profitable. The latter case is the one that everybody should worry about, and that's software-based miners. And so this is actual software installed in your system that is mining software as long as your computer is on and connected to the internet. So what we've seen in this situation is kind of two different use cases. So we've seen an individual who works for the company leverage corporate hardware in order to mine, and that's something that is not as bad as a third party coming in, but probably something you still need to remediate. And then, as I said, the latter is a malicious third party coming into your environment to set up mining software. So what we've seen a lot of is someone will find a way to get into your system. They will set up mining software in order to make passive income while they peruse your environment for either data to exfiltrate or to hold you for ransom. So software-based crypto mining in your environment can actually be an indicator that something worse is brewing. And so it requires further investigation. And so when you're looking at your DNS query logs and you're trying to determine whether you've got software-based traffic versus web-based traffic, really what you need to look for is anywhere between 500 to 1,500 DNS queries a day, coming from a specific machine or server to kind of point to you that some sort of pool activity is happening in your environment and that you need to take a couple of additional steps.
So, Austin, to detect mining in your DNS traffic, it sounds like largely it's based on volume, not necessarily what domains are being queried.
It's based off of the domains that are being queried, but also the volume. So, if you've got 1,500 DNS queries a day going that are tagged as crypto mining, whether you're using something like Umbrella or another software, your own custom block list, if you see that amount of traffic coming from an individual machine or endpoint, it's probably worth investigating. The domains could be something that you're familiar with or not, but it's really the DNS query volume that's tipping you off. And then you can go dig a little bit deeper to say, okay, well, this happens to be a Monero miner versus one of the other altcoin miners that's out there. So it helps you kind of hone in on what you need to do and what type of mining you're dealing with.
Yeah, it helps form your incident response, whether it's an insider threat or some external threat as well, and whether that internal, insider is acting malicious or if it's something that's sanctioned, right? I mean, this is all just good visibility to have into your infrastructure.
We actually had a recent, a couple months back, one of our customers actually used our crypto mining. So basically, with an Umbrella, we have the ability for you to, do a checkbox, right, and block crypto mining that's happening in your environment. So this specific customer was a retailer, and they noticed large spikes in activity coming from a couple of their different storefronts. And as it turns out, an employee actually had set up mining software on the demo laptops that customers are supposed to play with on several machines on several different retail locations. And so using Umbrella, they were able to figure out, okay, what stores are being hit, and ultimately figure out which employee was installing the software to make a little extra cheese on the side.
Right. That's really funny.
It's the modern equivalent of stealing office supplies.
Yeah, that's right.
That's very true. Very true. Are there other types of attacks that you're seeing that you believe could be trends, in 2021, or things that are popular that people aren't paying enough attention to, I guess I should say?
I would say that the things that we're seeing, we've seen a huge uptick in, obviously, ransomware and Trojan activity. A lot of it actually tied to COVID. So COVID has been interesting. We've seen so many new phishing sites and ransomware sites purely spun up, preying off people's fear around the pandemic. Where can I go get free testing? Scams set up to, pay me $800 or more to get, your first, COVID shot, first vaccine in order to be protected. So we've seen a large uptick, primarily in phishing and ransomware and Trojan activity related to the pandemic. But even without that traffic, we've still seen a large uptrend in those specific threat types. Artie, do you want to add anything?
I think today we can't avoid but talk about ransomware given the recent events. And one thing that we noticed is that heavy uptick in loader Trojan activity. And a big reason behind that is that today you rarely getting any kind of standalone ransomware. Ransomware becomes the result of multi-stage attack. So it's not like before I think this one. So before, what we've seen is that ransomware actors were going after the individuals. So what they will do is that they will weaponize mail spam with the actual ransomware. So they will send out these hundreds and millions of emails hoping that one of the people will click on it, and then their computer will be taken with the data taken hostage, and they will request ransom. So the way to make money from it was to infect as many victims as possible, get a lower ransom, and hope to get paid out. However, throughout few last years, what we noticed is that instead of actually starting with the ransomware right away, because the defenses actually evolved, people start utilizing a lot more cold storage backups. What actors changed is their approach to go after the big and juicy targets. So now the initial part of the attack still looks like a mail spam, but instead of the ransomware being deployed right away, you have something which we call the loader. Loader initially just fingerprints the system to get the understanding what kind of network it got the access to. Follow-up malware usually steals the information, any possible information about the network, and then some kind of the post-exploitation framework is being deployed. Today we see a lot of weaponized Cobalt Strike framework, which initially was used just for the pen testing, actually being used to take the whole control of the network, and as a final stage to deploy ransomware. So, recent events, I think, most likely is the result of this type of the attack, where someone got access to the part of the company's network. They figure out that network, is owned by a significant company, which probably can pay, decent amount of money, and also their data is very valuable. they probably spend some time figuring out what are the backup procedures and things like that, probably obtaining some kind of the credentials for the lateral movement. And then when they were ready, they deployed the ransomware, which resulted not in just some data being taken hostage, but in the actual disruption for the core business of that company. And again, that's, I think, the reason why we see uptick in all sorts of the malware out there and for the most part, it's being loader. One of the most famous loaders, which were pretty much the number one to being deployed in any kind of the enterprise last year was Emotet. But because of the law enforcement and other private and public companies participating all together, where they were able to take it down. But as we see, that business model is actually so valuable for the cybercrime that other types of the loaders popped up immediately. It took less than a few months for new cyber gang to apply the same kind of approach that Emotet actors were applying. And now we see like all sorts of the malware, trending in attacks to, our customers as well.
Artie, how much of this process do you believe is automated, and like which parts require human intervention from the attackers?
In my opinion, most of the initial reconnaissance steps are pretty much automated. So loader being deployed in automated way, all of the information is being collected is also automated. But then I think an actual human looks at the data, chooses the most valuable targets, and then when the post-exploitation framework is being deployed, most likely that's an actual human sitting out behind, just like a pen tester who got the initial access. He's sitting behind his computer and crumb by crumb, step by step, exploring the network, looking for the weak parts of it. And then, we still don't know if that's the same people who deploying ransomware, doing all of this reconnaissance. Or, in my opinion, most likely the person just identifies the most valuable network and then advertises it on probably like dark market for the biggest bidder. And my reasoning behind that is that we don't really have just one sort of that ransomware being used in this type of attack. Like we've seen Ryuk being used in very similar way. Now DarkSide is taking its place. Maze was doing the same. And I think those are competing gangs that are, bidding on this kind of access to the biggest network. And then whoever wins, they got, to deploy their ransomware.
I think it's super interesting to see the progression and evolution of the attackers, because I feel like we've fully transitioned from folks looking for PII, which of course still exists, right, to basically using that initial access to then commit a ransomware or enact a ransomware attack, and that becomes the monetization. Where I feel like 10 years ago, they were more focused on, I'm going to get credit card numbers, I'm going to get PII, and then I'm going to go sell that on the dark market. Now it seems more about selling access and using ransomware to monetize.
Correct. And I think we can speak, once again about the cryptocurrencies, because I think they make it easier for cybercrime to monetize their activities.
Right.
As you mentioned before, they used to steal credit cards, but the chain from credit card being stolen to get the money out of that credit card and to actually turn that money into the something that you can use was quite long. There would be money mules, there will be some illegal marketing schemes where people had to buy some kind of products, then sell those products.
Yeah.
Sorry. And only then get those money.
Yeah. And I think it was easier in that scenario to put up barriers to push attackers to a different style of monetization, right? I think PCI shined a light on that. And I think a lot of the other credit card fraud protections didn't solve it completely, but solved it enough that attackers started shifting, right? And going, wait a minute, I can monetize way more easily with cryptocurrency and ransomware and not have to worry about all the headaches that we created for them in credit card fraud.
Correct. Yes, like definitely. That's what we see anytime any type of the defense is being implemented. Attackers, when their life becoming a lot harder than they are willing to put effort in. They look for something easier. And in this case, I think, cryptocurrency gave them the opportunity to monetize it in a lot more easier way, right? And also it opened the doors for other types of the cybercrime to come in, right? Like we've seen developing of the Bitcoin mixers or cryptocurrency mixers. So that nefarious type of the cybercrime business is also evolving and developing new kind of services that needed in that kind of a niche cybercrime business groups.
Are mixers and tumblers the same thing? Or are those just different words for the same thing?
Yeah, I think they can be used interchangeably.
Okay. Also, you talked about mining cryptocurrency, ransomware, two different ways that they can make money, both using cryptocurrency, usually, or at least leveraging it. Do we still also see these folks going after hot wallets and cold wallets and cryptocurrency exchanges?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we still see a lot of that. So they'll set up.
Oh, I think we lost Austin there for a second. Oh, you're back. Sorry. You might need to restart, Austin. You had some bandwidth.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry about
bandwidth
that.
delay. No worries.
Hotel Wi-Fi is not the greatest.
No, certainly not.
But yeah, so as I was saying, we do still see a lot of phishing sites that are set up specifically for different exchanges. So they'll get you to put in your credentials. They'll use a 2FA workaround in order to get in. And then they'll empty your wallet and use that for either buying additional malicious infrastructure. Because at the moment, you can't necessarily go to a store and use your Monero to buy a wide variety of things, or to buy a house at the moment. So they're using that to buy additional infrastructure to kind of bolster their malicious enterprise, to kind of get a bigger grab of chunk of change as the market still kind of develops, and there's a little bit more time that it's going to take for you to be able to use Monero to purchase a home and to buy all those things you want without having to, in the past, buying gift cards, buying products, and then selling those online and having a longer turnaround time to actually getting hard cash that you can use to purchase what you want.
Yes, we also see a lot more requests on dark market for the specific credentials to the exchanges, because in that way, the stolen funds, would it be gathered from illicit crypto mining, cryptojacking, or ransomware, can be laundered in some sense from those stolen credentials, because the person whose credentials are being used, he might not be the same person who is getting money out of it. So again, like phishing attacks on cryptocurrency users, they start popping up about 2-3 years ago. We had a big case, coin hoarder case, where the millions of dollars in cryptocurrencies were stolen from the users. We actually were able to work with the law enforcement and Talos group to actually, take down that particular group. But again, just as with Emotet group, when there are money, there are people who are willing to put their time, even so they do, they do crime, but it's hard to stop this type of the crime without the entire global world coming together and stopping them. And, just as it goes with regular, money laundering or money transfers, like money usually go to the places where they don't have, law enforcement doesn't have jurisdiction, and then it's really hard to get, anything out of that back. And cryptocurrencies makes it even easier than what's done with fiat currencies.
Yeah, and I think probably the more value in getting people's credentials, again, is not the existing coins they have in their account, but as I already said, it's the ability to use that to launder money, or to set up. We've seen an instance about a year ago with Viacoin, where they'll choose a coin that has very low volume, and they'll just set up a bunch of bots, compromise 100 accounts, and then pump up the price of said coin that has low liquidity, and then cash out at the peak before it crashes. So in that case, I would say the credentials are a lot more valuable to the people who are purely just looking to use cryptocurrency and trading in order to get their cash out, when they don't want to rely on ransomware or doing other malicious efforts to get their money.
Awesome. You both have a great handle on the threat landscape out there, and I think it's a great endorsement for the work happening at Cisco Umbrella. Now, are many of these attacks? We know Cisco Umbrella for the DNS protections, but there's other products in that suite that can help organizations. Correct?
Yeah, we have several other offerings. We're big on SASE at the moment, but we also have a CASB product and a couple other things. Artie, I think we have a slide you can put up. So if you do want to come and learn a little bit more about some of the other offerings, that we have, you can definitely go to umbrella.cisco.com and check out what other things that we have available for your listeners. And then we also have a free 14-day trial if you want to try our DNS service to kind of see what traffic is coming through your environment, especially if you have IoT devices. It's pretty eye-opening once you connect your home network to see what's talking to the outer web when you think you have a more or less secure bubble around your house. But give it a try, whether for personal use or for enterprise, and we'd like to have you.
Fantastic.
But, yeah,
Artie.
So we don't offer a silver bullet that can solve all of the problems. Again, we recommend to use a layered approach for your security, have a good patch management, know what's going on in your network. But Cisco Umbrella provides a unique way of monitoring your DNS traffic and know what's going there from that point of view.
Fantastic. And if folks want to learn more, you can visit securityweekly.com/Cisco Umbrella. And there's some other URLs up there, but the landing page, of course, is securityweekly.com/Cisco Umbrella. Artie and Austin, thank you so much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you guys for having us.
Coming up next, we're wrapping up the show with the Enterprise Security News. Stick around. Today's connected world leaves no room for errors. Neustar reliably secures those connections. Neustar's cloud solutions, which include web application security, DDoS protection, DNS services, IP geolocation, and threat intelligence, ensure network availability across the globe. With over 20 years of award-winning security experience, Neustar proudly enables and protects digital assets of some of the world's largest enterprises. Find out how your company can benefit from the power of Neustar's trusted connection by visiting securityweekly.com/Neustar. Secure your world with Neustar. Always on, ultra secure. Do you worry about ransomware, data breaches, reputation damage, especially from phishing attacks, on employees working from home? The facts are, top cloud security tools have a 15% failure rate. 51% of phishing is social media based. Pixum knows because Pixum detects and stops breaches at point of click. Pixum's AI real-time solution detects actual fraud happening in a browser and stops it. Know your real security gaps. Get a phishing actualization test free at securityweekly.com/Pixum. That's PIXM. We all know that cybercriminals have the upper hand, and the most advanced ones have already made it past your defenses. When advanced threats like SolarWinds Sunburst compromise your business, you need a strategy. Tune into Extra Hop session Building a CISO Response Strategy to Advanced Threats at RSA Conference on May 19th to learn strategies to build resilience against advanced threats. Find session details and learn more about Extra Hop's presence at the 2021 RSA Conference at securityweekly.com/extrahop-RSAC. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. In our next technical training webcast happening tomorrow, May 13th, 11 a.m. Eastern Time, how attackers gain access to endpoints and learn how to use defensive strategies to protect against those attacks. On May 27th at 11 a.m. Eastern, explore the latest attacks against DNS and the latest techniques to make it possible to discover and disrupt attacks. Then join our webcast on June 3rd to learn about pen testing tools and why every organization should be using them regularly. Visit securityweekly.com/webcasts to learn more and register. Of course, /on-demand gets you to the entire archive. We are excited to present the enterprise security news this week. As always, lots going on in the enterprise security news.
A lot going on with us too. Webcasts.
Lots of webcasts.
And RSA.
And RSA. We're very busy. Keeps us out of trouble sometimes. I'll just start at the top. XM Cyber has announced integration with Palo Alto Networks Cortex XSOAR. I thought this was an interesting kind of coming together of your SOAR platform, enriching that data with breach and attack simulation, which I think continues to be a hot space in enterprise security, and I'm glad.
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting. Yeah, I didn't have time to dig them up, but with XSOAR, it's always interesting to look at what the actual automations are, and a lot of that stuff is on GitHub, so you can actually go and look at the code for that. I didn't get the chance here, but if you do get the chance, it's super interesting, and I do believe they still have a community edition of Cortex XSOAR, that you can play with if you want to test out the product.
Yeah, I thought this was a pretty, common sense strategy that if you see indicators of an incident at any stage, hopefully earlier in the stage of attack, that you can look towards the breach and attack simulation to go, yeah, there's actually an attack path to that critical asset, and here's what it looks like. And then if you see indicators that someone's starting down that path or looking at that path or maybe has started down that path, that should give it a higher priority in your incident response program, provided you have one, of course.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see what, how they're actually using it. One of the things that we started to see the breach and attack simulation space do, I want to say it was Veridin or SafeBreach or Attack IQ, one of those, is they started integrating with your monitoring products, like your SIM or XDR product or something like that, to check and see whether or not their simulated attacks are getting caught, or at least even showing up in those products. And then they could tell you, hey, your SIM is blind to what I just did.
Yep.
Go fix it.
I think all that's awesome. But I do worry about coverage in all that. Like, how well are you positioned to see as many indicators as you can, and then how much coverage are you getting in all the attack paths, and then what's your capabilities to put all that together? Because that's a pretty heavy lift.
Honestly, I don't think you want to go for maximum coverage initially with one of these products. I remember early versions of some of these products, you'd log in and the dashboard would say, there's 1.2 million ways to hack you.
Yeah.
You know, like, what am I supposed to do with 7-digit numbers here? Like, you know, it's you got to make it actionable. And I think you got to prioritize what you go after first here. You know, I think that's some of what you're going to get out of the, you know, the integration, the combination of these two here is, you know, go after the key things that you actually see, you know, some of these attacks doing, and you know, the key places where you can stop them first.
That's what we're seeing, I think, in the bulk of the technologies that are coming out in security in general, is that the concept of an isolated technology that solves one problem is starting to be more and more difficult to get approval for or actually roll out in your environment. What really works now is adding context from other silos and other areas to your originally siloed tool to give it breadth and depth of analysis. And that context is what takes it to the next level. So, for example, I'm seeing a lot of companies add cloud security type technologies to what otherwise may not be cloud security. But if you take the context of what they're able to pick up by being integrated with your cloud security provider, all of a sudden your pen test tool or your your managed service, everything gets richer and smarter. And I think what we're seeing is just a breadth of context being added to tooling to give it a broader approach. So it's going to be neat to watch that as we move forward.
Yeah, especially in the asset and vulnerability space, that context is super important and necessary.
Yeah, because, you know, if you find a vulnerability, it's like, great, you found a vulnerability, but what does it lead to? How do you chain from one item to the next item? How do you handle true incident response, blast radius detection, forensics, et cetera, on a particular vulnerability? Well, that's all done with the context of the rest of your environment. And I don't think you need necessarily have to go to a huge context style tool like Jupyter One has, but even just adding context to the individual tool is the way that those tools are going to grow over time.
It's interesting how there are so many ways to blend discovering what you have, and of what you have, what has vulnerabilities or misconfiguration, and then what are the actual attack paths that can be drawn from that, and bringing that all together, I believe is where the industry is trying to go. But there's just, Adrian and I were talking about it recently. There's so many different like Lego blocks you could use to build that. And like, what should you do? Like, I'm not even quite sure if I could give a blanket statement, right? It would depend on the individual enterprise and what segment of that enterprise. You may end up with a few different strategies and technologies to be able to build that. Like, your application development is going to be different from your Windows infrastructure. It's going to be different from your Linux infrastructure, which might be different from your desktops, and then your email phishing and your cloud services. So.
Well, I think the good thing about that is that we don't, as individuals, we don't have to do that. You know, we take the Legos, we dump the bucket out on the table, and we don't have to be the ones necessarily putting them together, because your, vuln management vendor or your breach simulation vendor, they're looking at those Legos and extending their technology to include Legos that they didn't already have.
Right.
And so you don't actually have to do a lot of the building. You can, if you want to build a strong security program with great breadth, do something off of a true context management type solution. But I don't think we have to. In the near term, all the vendors are going to add that context themselves because they have to enrich what they have.
Right. And both these platforms are great examples of that. Both in XM Cyber and Cortex XOR, you have these huge libraries of attack simulations on one side and pre-built automations on the other side. And if those don't suit what you need, then as long as you got some Python developers, you can pretty much build whatever you want.
Yep.
Interesting how it ties into API security as well. There was an announcement, I think, from Sequence that got some funding. And also Peloton had a breach that was API related, which I wasn't aware of. But until this week. And I found it really, really interesting. When they analyzed the Peloton breach, it was very specific API insecurities and misconfigurations. And the thing I liked most about this article was to tackle these issues, they say the answer is to shift left while you shield right. I was like, if I had to sum it up in like one sentence, I'd go with that. I like that.
That's pretty much the secret to AppSec and has been for a while.
Yeah.
In general, AppSec has always preached, let's shift left, shift left, shift left. And that's great, but you can't ignore operational security that comes by shifting right. I used to call it shifting right, but I think the terminology they used is fine. Protect right or cover right or whatever you want to call it. You use kind of the build as the demarcation point, and everything left of that is AppSec. Everything right of that is runtime security of some sort. And I don't think that changes just because we're going from web servers or web-based applications to API-driven systems. It's still an application and it's still an interface. The interface isn't just graphical. It's a REST API or whatever. So you still have to do both code security, shift left security, as well as operational side for your APIs. Add to that the fact that applications have transitioned from written to assembled using libraries to, in the future, they'll all be those libraries. You won't download an open source library. You'll just make a call to somebody else's API that's maintained somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And if we truly believe that that's the future, then API security is going to be one of the biggest markets in the next 5 to 7 years that we can possibly get involved in, because everything will transfer over to APIs and API-driven assembly of applications.
Yeah. And you're right, Tyler. You may not own all those APIs, which is always my concern, because I think if you're left of the problem, you got a better chance of going like, look, when you create the API, make sure it gets created securely. I mean, ignoring the trillions of lines of legacy code. If you're going to do a new application, you're in good shape in terms of being able to apply good development practices and a really good process in DevOps or other strategies to go, when we build this app, it's going to have at least an 85% kind of secure API, right? Because inherently, you could probably do that pretty easily. My concern is when I go off and I've got API gateway and I've got other cloud native apps or other services I'm using, how are they protecting the API that's now incorporated in my application? And that's a two-way street, right? How much do I trust the data coming down from that API and processing it as well?
I think it's similar to the transition when we did architecture transitioning from in our data center to cloud service providers. Mm-hmm. You have to trust at some point there's a line that's drawn where security and trust of security that it's getting done transfers into your service provider. And if we continue to push into API usage for applications, that's the same exact transition. At some point, we have to say, okay, we don't own the APIs. We don't write the code for the APIs. We make the calls to Google Maps as a basic example, or Twilio. And we trust that Twilio or Google Maps is giving us a secure interface, a secure backend. It's very similar to the demarcation that happened in infrastructure transference. And I think that's going to be a really, really cool future trend to watch. So if anybody wants to build a company on API security, there's a lot of space there.
Mm.
And we're starting to see people fill in that space, right?
Yep. Yeah, jumping back to the list, Cycode.
Cycode.
Right?
Yeah, it's interesting how they say prevent code tampering. I mean, that's actually kind of what Tyler and I were just kind of hinting towards is, my calls back and forth between the API, the data flowing back and forth, if that's tampered in some way, that could be dangerous.
Yeah, and in the case of Peloton, everybody in the world knows that I worked out like twice since I bought my Peloton and never touched it again. So that's such a data leak.
Right. I think we could have theorized that people that bought Pelotons, that some of them were lazy.
I hope that somebody dumped all the data just to do that analysis.
Right? I mean, how lazy am I? I don't even own a Peloton, so I'm on a whole different laziness level.
No, you remember there are a bunch of...
You're the lazy that goes, that's what I am. I'm cool with it.
Yeah.
I'm the lazy that goes, no, I'm not lazy. I'm just going to spend $3,000 to prove I'm lazy.
Right. Well, I did buy an e-bike that you don't have to really pedal if you don't want to. So that's also a whole other class of laziness.
All right, Adrian. That's the flip side of that. Yeah, I mean, the last big stories, before, Peloton's other issues have slightly overshadowed this. But wasn't it when Biden was first coming in that he wanted to bring his Peloton with him, and there were concerns about that?
There's so many concerns about Biden on a Peloton. I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, yeah, no, they're going through a rough patch.
I mean, it's not a Stairmaster, but I just have to say the memes about that were absolutely hilarious. Something's happened in the world and it's just awful, but the memes are great.
We got to have something to laugh about.
That's true. On to more serious news, Help System acquires Beyond Security, which is interesting. They just bought
acquiring a bunch of stuff.
But what's interesting now is they just bought Digital Defense. So like they're swallowing up now 2 vulnerability management providers. And I think Help Systems is a sponsor. Just full disclosure, we did a sponsored interview with Bob Erdman last week on Paul Security Weekly. He was very tight-lipped about what was coming up because I kind of had some tips. I'm like, Bob, you guys are positioned to do some stuff. He's like, maybe. And so now this week, they picked up their second vulnerability management provider, couple that with Core Impact and Cobalt Strike. If they can put all these pieces together, take the best of all these products, they're poised to really be a player in the market. What I really would love to see is the incorporation of the vulnerability management platform, the kind of pen testing and exploit platform, and a breach and attack simulation style to that. Whether they adopt what they have or they acquire breach and attack simulation, to put that all together, I think you can, I don't use the analogy check a lot of boxes, right? But I think if that product works really well, you've got great coverage because you're picking up VM providers, you've got great validation of what is real, and then you've got a great attack path simulator that's going to tell you where your weakest paths are. I mean, if you can do that and stay enough ahead of the attackers to stay out of the headlines, that could be really cool.
I'm just going to clear up my own confusion out loud because I think it might help others. I was not familiar with Beyond Security, but apparently
they're not Beyond Trust and not
Beyond Trust.
And sometimes I got them confused with Digital Defense, and I'm like, did you buy the same company twice? I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah. But so Beyond Trust, the EI stuff is all end of life and I think shut down by now.
Is it really? Okay.
Yeah. So if it's not shut down, I think it was December. They were shutting down the support for the last of it, or maybe they ended sales and support's still going on for another year or something like that. But it's dead. It's effectively dead, unless you still have some of it running somewhere. They won't sell it to you. But Beyond Security, it looks like is entirely. Are they entirely AppSec focused? It looks like SAST and DAST.
Oh, is it? I read it as more basic vulnerability management. They could be stronger on the AppSec side. I know that
the industry's only vulnerability management platform to combine XDR, SAST, DAST, and mobile security.
Interesting.
Is their tag? Is there the short version on their website?
Because Digital Defense, Bob was talking about, also had some web app scanning capabilities, some DAST as well.
They do.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a traditional stack. Veracode had that same stack for years.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not, I definitely wouldn't say they're the only ones to combine those.
No, certainly not.
No, but that's rounding out Help Systems stack there. All Help Systems needs now is a attack surface management vendor, right?
Right. That'd be interesting if that was next. They're putting together an interesting portfolio, and also don't forget too, you combine all these research teams into one. Now you start to be able to compete at a much higher level in this space. I mean, because that's a lot of what separates the big three VM vendors is they're all public now, so they've all gone through funding rounds, and now they've got public money, and they can go out and hire huge research teams that they've been building for years and years and years. How do you compete with that? Well, you buy companies and combine the research teams is one way.
Yeah. And then there's CSPM, which you could kind of put in a space. And then there's, container security, and then there's, like the Synopsys Black Duck type of, looking at the library level of stuff. Like Paul said, there's a lot of sprawl in vulnerability management right now.
Yeah, you could really extend vulnerability management to all those areas. Not in our next group test, as we agreed upon.
Not all at once, at least.
Not all at once. Got to break it down. Accurix, I should say. I always say that wrong. Accurix has an open source project called Terrascan, which is kind of their open source like infrastructure as code project is now integrating with the Argo project. So Argo is an open source GitOps engine for Kubernetes. And so they're combining those together to support each other, which is interesting.
And we're seeing so much infrastructure as code scanning stuff now. Like I feel like every week there's been at least one story in here talking about scanning your cloud formation stuff, or your I'm assuming Terrascan scans Terraform stuff.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Sorry, the Sequence Security API was not a funding announcement. It was actually a Sentinel 2.0 is their product, which they came out with, which is going back to our previous discussion. They call it 360-degree visibility because someone in marketing wrote it, which is fine. I understand. You got to, marketing people got to do the marketing. But helping eliminate surprise discoveries of APIs deployed outside of a defined process. I think most organizations today need that. If they don't need it today, they will need it in the future. And as Tyler said, it's a hot space to be in.
The marketing, I'm just in my mind's eye, Tyler, how often do you put on like an Oculus Rift headset or something like that to come up with your marketing messaging?
You don't see my normal office that's just full of headsets and crazy gear that puts me in the mood of looking 360. Just saying.
Yeah.
I'm having visions of the Plague in the movie Hackers when he puts on the VR headset. He's swinging his arms furiously.
I just scour the world for the web for buzzwords that I can add that don't sound too far off, and then I put in like 40 of them, and then it just works out.
Yeah. Pivoting to email security, protecting sensitive emails and attachments, Seclor Security 24 is a product in that space. And as I believe this is like a kind of a product update announcement, I think very similar to Material Security. Interested, to see the differences. Of course, Material Security is a sponsor here on the show, so we were able to do a deep dive into how they do it, which I really like, and I think it is an integral part of your strategy to protect your sensitive data. As we've established, a lot of that lives in email. It needs to be protected above and beyond just phishing, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean it's interesting that this is still even a third-party product at this point, though. I feel like, with most people using Office 365 and G Suite and stuff like that, this should be more built into that. I'm shocked at the amount of bad stuff that makes it through Office 365.
Well, I think that Google and Microsoft are in the business of providing email. And providing security for your email, they've left to other people, right? I mean, their teams are poised to go, I want email to be available. I want to store a ton of it. I want to collaborate with it. And security doesn't fit into that mix if you're providing the infrastructure and the service to provide email, right?
I thought Office 365 had it, but remember back when, I think they shut it down or spun it out or something, but Google had purchased an email security company, started with a P. Anybody remember the name of it off the top of their head?
I didn't know there was going to be a test. I would have studied.
It's a memory test. I failed it. But yeah, they eventually shut it down, but I remember it doing a really good job back in the day. The times I'd used it.
Yeah, I think
it's interesting that they don't want to run that piece now.
Yeah.
That they're leaving this to third parties.
I think it is interesting they're leaving it to third parties because they could certainly acquire. Is there any money in it?
Is there any money truly left in it? Because almost like it's a commoditized situation that they probably looked at it and said there's really not, it's going to be a minimal add-on cost. If anything, maybe we just throw it in for free when you sign up. So the heck with it. We won't even do that. It just ends up being a cost center. Let third parties run it.
I mean, I honestly see it as one of the few places in security where you could claim some actual ROI because, messing up people's inbox, cleaning out people's inbox is probably like that's at the top of my list of things I want to happen to my inbox.
We're in cybersecurity. What is ROI? What is this ROI thing you speak of?
That's what I'm talking about. It's like there's not a whole lot of opportunities for it, but email is one.
I mean, put it in the context of I want to securely upload or send a message to my accountant, right? Most of those firms and small bit, I mean, they're using something like a Mimecast, right? It's an add-on. Yeah. They may have Google or Office 365, but they have this requirement. And why isn't that in the Microsoft platform? Maybe it is. You could probably build it today, with everything in the Office 365 suite, right? Or maybe it's in beta, or maybe they just don't have it. And as Tyler said, there's no money in it. So we're going to leave it to Mimecast. Like, why go into this market and disrupt it if they don't have to?
Well, and look at our own needs at Security Weekly. Like, trying to find a Microsoft product where we can enable people to send us attachments,
right?
It is pretty damn tough, right?
So you end up in a third party.
Yeah, hard problem, high cost, low revenue, low margin. Forget it.
Yeah. I think you're spot on, Tyler, in that analysis. I think that there's lots of other ways Microsoft and Google can make money than trying to play in this space, right? Let's see. We talked about the pipeline attack pretty much at length. Related to that, I did see it was interesting. So the folks at Synac, right, kind of the crowdsourced pen testing kind of thing, are working with DoD and DOE in offering the value of a crowdsourced pen test into those sectors, and there's some incentives there in that program. It sounded like the government is incentivizing this activity to happen in order to improve critical infrastructure security, and this is just one way is to get these highly focused crowdsourced pen tests in there, testing and helping secure the power grid. As the founder of Synac, what's his name? Now I can't.
I'm hoping that.
I did. Jay Kaplan, right?
Yeah. I'm hoping that's a closed crowdsource, a closed crowd, not an open crowd, right? Because that would scare.
Synac is more of a closed crowdsource kind of model. Yeah,
and they've always been. So he comes out of government. So he started Synac with a lot of government contacts. I think he's ex-NSA. So that's always been their kind of one of their niches. Is you can trust our crowd.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, sure, that makes sense if it's a closed crowd, a hand-selected crowd, certain people. That's no different than a pen test with, 1,000 approved people that you vetted, right? It's a similar thing. And then I think it makes a whole lot of sense. You're just extending your penetration testing, really.
Yeah, and so when I was talking about positive versus negative reinforcement, right? Under the NERC SIP incentives approach, utilities would receive incentives for voluntarily applying SIP requirements to safeguard all external routable connectivity to and from low impact to high or medium impact systems. So this would fall under positive reinforcement. If you implement these guidelines, then you get some incentive, right? Grant incentives to utilities that implement automated and continuous monitoring. It's also in there.
I can't wait to see the ROI or efficacy of that plan. I'll be to bet it's a very, very low.
Yeah, they do link to the details. I did not read all of the details. The only thing this article says is that there are incentives, right? But what is the incentive? Is it money?
Is it incentive would have to be huge.
Yeah, or to make it worth it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I think this is the same bucket of money that, in the first segment, I mentioned the, no interest loans and some of the other opportunities these same utilities have for replacing equipment and putting in cybersecurity controls and things like that.
Yeah, I think they need to be incentivized to take down some of their technical debt, because inherently there's huge technical debt and we're going to put this system in and it's going to live for 20 or 30 years. And it's hard to, back to ROI, it's hard to justify that ROI in an infrastructure business versus an enterprise business.
Yeah, I think this is the same one. Yeah, because they're talking about, there's two types of incentives, rate of return adder of 200 basis points, which I assume has, okay, I don't understand what that means. Oh, or deferred cost recovery for certain cybersecurity related expenses. Right. So, yeah, again, I think that's referring to some of these no interest loans.
Well, because you take an enterprise business that has competition. You reduce your technical debt, and that improves your customer experience. So you could argue to your board, hey, we're going to get more customers. By the way, we're also going to be more resilient to attacks. So it's a double win. You can't translate that to critical infrastructure. I don't have a choice who provides me power. And I can't go, I'm going to go with that power company because they've got an app and a better user experience and they're more secure versus the other one where it's an antiquated system. Like, you don't have a choice. It's infrastructure.
It's like ISPs are often like that too. You don't really have a choice. But I'm going to read my favorite sentence here, which is the total cybersecurity incentives requested would be capped at the zone of reasonableness.
No, the zone of reasonableness. It sounds like someone has their wizard hat on. Their wizard hat on. You are now entering the zone of reasonableness. And you are alone because there are very few people. There's no one else in the zone of reasonableness.
I cast incentives.
Yeah, right.
That's right next to the swamp of no return from Princess Bride, right? Or whatever that swamp was.
The fire swamp.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess social media is the exact opposite of the zone of reasonableness.
Right. With the ROUTSs?
Yeah.
Rodents of unusual size?
Yes.
That's also what Twitter is. It's full of those as well.
Yes. ForcePoint has acquired Cyber Inc. Cyber Inc. delivers a remote browser isolation technology, which is kind of interesting.
Still a thing.
Still a thing. I think it's deployment that people get hung up on with remote browser isolation, deployment and maintenance, right? It's that whole, not ROI in the context of the business, but ROI in terms of how much security is it providing versus how much effort it is to implement and maintain. How much pain does it cause the users? I mean, security people, I think we like the browser isolation in terms of technology and thwarting attacks. But again, we can't just base our decisions based on, well, it's cool tech and it prevents attacks, but there's other criteria that you need to take
user experience. User experience, efficacy more often than not.
What's the most critical app on most people's systems that they use the most? It's the web browser. So you can't mess with, you can't break too much with the web browser. You got to be very careful there. And I actually covered this market when I was back at 451. And it's interesting how little has changed with it. I think most of them, like I haven't seen a whole lot of funding here, but it seems like most of them have been able to stay alive, and there have been a few acquisitions here, but yeah, I think ultimately it's something with a niche use case. ForcePoint, was partially born out of Raytheon, so I'm betting there are a lot of federal use cases here where within this certain environment, you're going to have to use a remote browser over a local one.
Yeah, I think for me, I like Pixum's solution. I like the browser plugin because I think from a user experience, it sits there in the background and it doesn't get in the user's way. I also like Vicarious and other similar technologies that are doing runtime protection, in-memory protection to protect against browser exploits. And those are two different attack paths. And right now, as far as I know, you need two different products to protect it, but that's the other route you could take.
Yeah, I think Pixum is, it's interesting. So the latter one that you mentioned, I think is interchangeable with a remote browser. The idea with the remote browser isn't necessarily that it stops the attack; it's that the attack happens somewhere where it can do less damage.
Like a Bromium.
Yeah, limiting blast radius. Now, Bromium, I think, would actually do some detection. Yeah. But because it was still on your machine, and the data you might want to protect might have been within that. Micro virtualization sandbox that Bromium creates. But Pixum, I think, is complementary with both, because that's, a phishing site is not exploitation.
Right.
That's at the human social engineering level, and you need a totally different kind of protection for that.
Mm-hmm. Sophos is claiming they're launching the industry's only XDR solution that synchronizes, bear with me now, endpoint, server, firewall.
We got some qualifiers.
And email security. And I think what they're saying is they're the only one that has XDR that goes across endpoint, server, firewall, and email security, which is a bold claim. Not sure how true that might be.
I don't think I've seen email security or firewall really in an XDR solution. Most of what I've seen is I haven't dived too deep into it, admittedly, but most of what I've seen is network and endpoint combined.
Right. Yeah, the email security one I think is the qualifier for me that would be interesting. I mean, Sophos has a huge email security product suite as well.
Our XDR adds email security, I think, is the more understandable.
Yeah, I agree.
Headline.
Agreed. Cool. Adrian,
but not too bad. We've seen worse announcements.
Yeah, for sure. Did you guys have anything you saw this week you wanted to add into the mix? Adrian's just been buried. I know Adrian's been buried this week because
I'm never not buried, so I don't have anything specific to add. I think we covered the bulk of the good ones that I saw.
Outstanding. Tyler, Adrian, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for listening and watching this edition of Enterprise Security Weekly. See you next time.